Hello and welcome. Are you looking to learn SQL? Are you trying to understand the basics of how you can select data from a single table? Are you looking to understand how you can join multiple tables and extract data? Are you trying to understand basic SQL functions? Are you trying to understand how to use table expression to make some SQL decision? Then you've come to the right channel. My name is Jonathan Paulin, and I will be the pilot for this series. And what we'll be doing in this first series of the videos is for us to work on the medical facility data that everybody is used to. This is where we have patient tables, we have appointments, we have insurance, we have billings, we have the providers. So we'll understand how we can query single table. After we understand the single table, we'll move on to understand how we can navigate to add multiple tables. We'll work with various functions like aggregate functions, like string functions, like date functions. We'll then learn how the logical processes behave, and we'll walk into using a table expressions where we talked about derived tables, we talk about common table expressions, which is CTE. We equally talk about views. If you're looking to understand this and you want to follow me along, I will leave the script to create the database on the description below, so you can pick the script and you run it and you can follow this series as we go along. So if stick around, all I want to ask you to please like the video, please subscribe, and do not forget to hit the notification button so that when a new video is uploaded for this series, you will not miss it. So without further ado, I want to ask us, let's just jump into this series and begin to write SQL code. So the first thing that we'll be doing for this video is for us to connect to the database that we want to work on. It is always a good thing for you to write, or at the top of your script you indicate the database that you're querying from, because when somebody read your code, they can easily understand what database that code should go to. So the first thing I would do is to say use data Pauline's data tech, and I say go. This will activate the database that I want to run all my queries. So if you look at the top, you will see there is a master here. And if I execute this code by selecting it and hit execute, I will see command successful, and at the top it switches to the database that I need. Before I jump into doing the exercises for today, there are two things you need to really know. The first thing is called select. The second thing is called from. These two things, if you understand and know where they are positioned and know their function, you will not miss selecting data or querying data from a single table. The from is just where your data is. So I'll call this guy, I call it the data source. So this is your data source. Basically, your data source is where your table or where your data is sitting. Every table, every data in SQL sits in a table. So where your table is sitting is what will appear in the from clause when you're running or querying data from a single table. Then the select is where you list out the list of columns that will appear there. So this is where your column list will appear. So your column list appears in the select statement. And each individual column, as you call them, you put a comma to indicate that that is the end of the column. And if you reach at the last one, you're not interested to add another one, you do not put a comma on that last one. But if you want to extract all the records, then you take a different approach and put a star. The star indicates that you're trying to pull all the columns from a table. Now let's move on into answering a couple basic questions that is given to us as that is given to us as a requirement. Down here, they're asking us to write all the query, to return all the queries, to write a query that will return all the columns from the address table. Now, because I am on my database, I do not need to worry about where my table is going to be run from because I already selected it at the top. The first thing I want to do, I write my select. I say star from. They say I should pull it from the address table. One thing we should remember is that every of the schema for this particular database is the DBO schema. So I will call the DBO dot address table. And if I run this query, I can see that I have by the lower right of the bottom right of this code, I can see the total number of rows, and it is telling me that I have 170 rows coming out of this table. And to select all the column, I can see that I have 5 columns. And in addition to that, if I hover around the star or the asterisks, I will see the list of columns that is used to create the table. And also remember, I can also, since it is a DBO schema, I can still write the query like this without supplying the schema, and the query will still run, not a problem. But a best practice is that you always remember to put your DBO as a schema. You put your schema to the table so that you get used to the fundamental of the whole thing. So that is how we can pull record from from a single table. We have another question here also that is asking us to write a query that will return all the columns from the address type table. Same thing. I can come down here. I say select star from, and I say DBO dot address type. Address type. So remember, the address type needs to exist inside of the database for the query to run properly. Otherwise, it would tell me an invalid object. So at this point, if I execute this code, I can see that I have 4 rows by the bottom and I have 2 columns for the address type. And if I hover around the asterisks, I can equally see the columns that are in that particular table. So that is how we can pull all the columns from the address type table. Let's keep going. And here I have another query that is asking me to write a query that will return all the columns from the appointment table. With this, I can write select star from. I will call the DBO dot my appointment table. And if I run the query by selecting it and hit execute, I can see that I have 82 rows in the appointment table. And then I can see the number of columns that is selected, all the columns. So that is how we can select all columns from a single table. So that is the basics of how we can select all the columns from a table. But one thing I need to let us know is that this is not a good practice, especially if you have a voluminous um, number of records in your table. It could slow your system down. But as we go on the series, stick around, you will see a lot of best practice as we go. But this star gives you some kind of understanding of what your data is contained, so you can understand what is inside of the data, because with this knowledge we can use it to answer the first questions that is coming up, which is how we can retrieve specific columns from a table. So same thing, remember when I said to select stuff from your table, so you need to understand these 2 things, the select and the from. You need to know where the function or the work of the from. You need to know the work of the select. Again, the from is where your data is sitting, and your data sits in a table, so you want to call the table. Remember, schema dot table name. Then on the select is where you list the column. Previously, we did a star to call all the column, but now we want to go in by beginning to select each individual column or specific columns from the table. Rather than pulling the whole thing, we want specific column. So, for example, if I want to list specific column from this table, I can say this is the table. I can say table name, so table underscore name, for example. Then on the select, I say column one, comma. I have to put a comma for each list that I'm trying to call, just like a list. I say column two, comma, column three, comma, column four. But now, if I don't need column five, I do not need to put a comma here because if I do, the query is wrong. So if I want to end my column to only column four, then I can just stop there. Now, let's take this idea, this knowledge, and answer some basic questions. The first question that we have here, we want to write a query that will retrieve the diagnosis name, the severity of those diagnoses, the diagnosis description from the diagnosis table. So to do that, first of all, it is good. It helps you write the query easy and you don't have to write too much code. You use the advantage of the IntelliSense. So to approach this, it is good to write a select. It is good to write a select star from. You call the table name as a DBO dot the diagnosis table. Now I go back to the select the star and take the star off. Now see the advantage that I have by calling that star first. Because when I call that star first, I can run the code with the star and I see what is contained inside of the table. I can see all these beautiful columns. I can understand the data. I can see that I have diagnosis date, diagnosis description, diagnosis code. I can see the diagnosis name, type, severity, the treatment plan, the medication. I can see a lot of information. Without this star, and I wanted to go straight to extracting the columns name, I may not see other wonderful informations on the table. That is the advantage of the select star, even though you want to write specific columns. But now see another advantage. The moment I begin to type for the diagnostics name, I say DIA. The moment I do that, I can see all these options that I can select from. So from that, I can use my up or down arrow and move it up or down to get to what I need. And once I get to the column that I need, I hit the tab button. It will give me the column that I need. I put a comma. The next thing that I need is the severity of the diagnosis. I can do that. I only type 3 words and the severity comes out. I did not have to type the whole thing. I take the severity and they said I should get the diagnosis description. The moment I put DIA, I can see the options. I can move up or down and pick what I need. Oops, I don't need this. I can put underscore and I get the description. Now, when I do that, I can run this code with only getting the specific column names. And I can now see the data. I can understand what I'm working with from this particular data. So moving on, I can come down here. I have another requirement for me to write a query that will retrieve the bill ID, the bill date, and the bill amount. Again, remember the rule of thumb or the guide or the practice. Take your select star, go into the table, gain some kind of knowledge into that table, then for you to see the type of columns that you're working with. So I will come down here, say select star from. I'm looking for the billing table. I say DBO dot billings and I run the code. I can see that I have a bill ID. I have a patient ID, provider ID, appointment ID, diagnosis ID, prescription ID, procedure ID, bill date, and the bill amount. And you can see or understand if you know much about SQL that all these things, except of the bill ID, are kind of like a relationship to a different kind of table. So they want us to put some specific columns. So they say that we should get the bill ID. I can call the bill ID, comma. I can call the bill date, comma, and I can call the bill amount, comma, the bill amount. Remember, I am just formatting the code like this so that it is easy for you to read or anybody to read. It's another good practice for you to take advantage of. And also another advantage is that you can either put a go. We'll talk about all those down in the series. But for now, this is one formatting pattern that I like using because it helps people read the code. So I select the code, I hit execute, and I pull up these 3 columns and 75 rows. And moving on, I have another requirement for me to pull records for the first name, the last name, the date of birth, the gender, and the insurance information from the patient table. So basically, I'm pulling the first name, last name, date of birth, gender, and insurance information for these patients. So what I need to do, I write select that from, I call the DBO dot the patient, and I will run this code at this point. And when I see and understand what is contained in the table, like the patient ID, address ID, first name, last name, date of birth, gender, and all those information. Now I know what I need to do next. The next is for me to list my columns. Now, the columns, they want me to call the first name, they want me to call the last name, they want me to call the date of birth, they want me to call the gender, they want me to call the insurance information. Remember, anything that appears in your select statement is what anybody will see. So at this point, I run the code. I can see that I'm able to limit all those columns to just this number of columns. And that is good. Let's do one more. Let's pull the prescription date, the medication name, the dose, and the frequency of that medication for that particular from the prescription table. What I would do at this point is to write my select star from, I call my DBO dot the prescription table. I select my code and I run it. I can see that I have a patient ID and provider ID. That means which can tell us a lot of things. But when we get to pulling record from multiple tables, we'll talk about what this guys is. But for now, we can see and understand what this table is all about. But now we need to go and meet up the requirement, which is to get the prescription date, to get the medication date, the medication name, sorry, to get the dosage, and get the frequency of that medication. At this point, I can run this code and I can see for that specific information. So that is a good thing. Now, when we run our code, the presentation of the data sometimes matters. For example, we want to sort the record. How do I want to see the record the first time that I run it? Do I want to see it by the first name sorted out in alphabetical order? Do I want to see it by the frequency of the prescription sort in an alphabetical order, or do I want to see by the prescription date from the highest to the lowest, or from the earliest to the oldest? It depends because presentation of our data is a very crucial thing when we are working with our record. So, and this is where this um, next piece of the code comes into play. How do you sort your data? So sorting your data with order by is a very important thing or knowledge to know. So I have a requirement here that says we should write a query that will retrieve the medical condition, the past medical history, and the record date and time from the medical history table. But that is not all they want. They want me to sort the record by the past medical history. The one good thing about writing a select star to see what is contained in the table is that when they give you the requirement may not conform to how the table was created in terms of the naming convention. But when you go into the table, you create that kind of understanding with the table and know the data that is in there, you will understand if the column is there and how it is written. So let's answer this question together. So if I select star from, I say they're looking for the medical history table, I can say DBO dot the medical history. And if I run the code, and I can see that I have medical condition, the past medical history, and I can see all this stuff. Now, the most important thing about this is that if you watch the medical condition, they put a space in it. That is how the requirement came. I cannot follow that, and I cannot know if that is right or wrong if I do not go into the table. Now, let's say I did not go into the table and I go off by the requirement that they gave and I say medical a space condition. I can see that there is a problem because that is not how it is written in the table. So the column that you're calling should exist in that table for you to get an accurate data or accurate code. So they want me to write the medical condition. I say medical condition, comma. They want me to call the past medical history. I can do that. They want me to call the record date, which is the record date and time that they record that information. And yes, and that is all they want me to call. So what I do step by step, I run the code, I see what they want. But now they want me to sort the record by the past medical history in a descending order. Let me come on the top here and show us something. In SQL, when we are sorting records, whether ascending or descending, there are two things we need to keep in mind. If we call A as C, we means ascending. If we call D as C, we means descending. So keep that in mind as we add that information to this code. They want me to sort the record by past record history, which is this guy. So what I can do, I come down here, I say order this record by the past record, the past medical history in a descending order. Remember, the order by is the same thing as sort. Remember, technical, non-technical kind of language. By this, and I run this code, I can see now that it has been sort by the past medical history in a descending order. So I can see what this medical condition is, what the past history is, and the date they confirm that. That was late in the night, 8:30 in the night, or yeah, 8:30 in the night. So, but this guy makes the record flip from a descending order, which is from Z to A kind of thing. So that is what that code would do for us. But and we can move on to another one. I'll have other explanation to do once I hit that point. So I have another requirement that said I should write a query to retrieve the first name, the phone number, email address, date of birth, and gender from the provider table. So I'm trying to pull record that has to do with our providers. And they want me to sort the record by the date of birth in an ascending order. So in this case, I will come down here, say select star from. I call this guy, I say DBO dot, I say DBO dot I go further, I say DBO dot, they want me to pull it from the provider table. You can call it from the provider table. First thing first, one step at a time. I run the code and I see the information on the provider table. Now, one thing that I need to say is that you get bored writing the select star even though you know what you're about to do, but you may not know how the column is stored in the table. That is why the select star, the pain is worth it. So when I run the select star, I can see what I have on the table. I can now come back and list my column. I can see on the table and the requirement it meets, it said I should call the first name. And I can see in the table and the requirement that there is a phone number. I can see in the table and the requirement. Remember to put your comma each time you want to add another column. I say comma and I call the email address. I say comma and I call the date of birth. And finally, they want me to call the gender. And after I do that, I can select my code and I can run it. I can see the record. But now they want me to select this record to sort this record by ascending order. I can come down here. That means I can come down here now and I say order by. Order by. They want me to call the date of birth and I say date of birth in ascending order. And if I select this code and run it, I can see that it has been sorted in ascending order. But better still, the default behavior of SQL when it comes to selecting item is ascending order. So pay attention to this record. The first record here, when I select it by ascending order by adding this ASC, it is this date. I will copy this date and keep track of it. And I will come down here and then the email address is William. I will come down now and take this ASC off just to prove that the default behavior of SQL when it comes to sorting is ascending order. So if I do not put the ASC and run it, I should still get the same exact result, and which is correct. So that is what the ascending order will do for us. Next, let's look at retrieving the record from the procedure table, but selecting only the procedure date, procedure description, cost, and duration. And they want us to sort the record based on the cost in the highest to lowest cost, which is pretty typical, right? So at this point, what I can do, I come down here and write my select star from, I call my DBO dot DBO dot, they want me to pull it from the procedure table. I got blank for a second. The procedure table, and I can run it. Now we had a problem. Needed to pay attention to something. This is not a problem because the table is not good. It's because the procedure in SQL is it's like a reserve word. It's something. Actually, it's like an object if you want to create something. So all we can do at this point to tell SQL that this is not stored procedure we are calling, I can put a square bracket around the procedure, surround it, and now if I run it, it will work. It gives me the whole record from the table, but what I am looking to pull is the procedure date, I'm looking to pull procedure description. I'm looking to pull the cost, and I am looking to pull the duration. At this point, I can run it. And when I do, I can see that I have all this record and this is the cost. But I want the cost to be sorted in the highest to lowest cost. So we can see that the records are not sorted because we can see 4,000 here, we can see 250, and we can see a bunch of numbers scattered all over the place. The requirement is that we can sort this record from the highest cost to the lowest cost. So I can come down here at the data and I say order by, or order by the cost, which is what they ask for, the cost in a descending order, DESC. And if now I select this record and execute this code, I can see that it is going on from the highest to the lowest cost. So these are just the basic thing that we can do on our code. But now, pay attention. Look at this procedure date. Look at the procedure description, the cost, and all this. This may not be the best way to present the data if I'm sending it to a vendor, for example. I wanted to give a little bit more friendly, user-friendly name, maybe put in the capital, put each first word in capital, don't put an underscore, something. But we can change the appearance of the column by using something called alias. The alias is just like you have your real name, it's never changed, but what people know you as is what the alias now turns out to be. So let's use it to answer this question. They want us to write a query that will retrieve the policy number, the expiration date, and the claim status from the insurance table. But they want us to rename the claim status to read only status, not claim status. So to do that, I can write my select star from, I can call the insurance table. I call DBO dot insurance table. And if I run my query, by selecting it and clicking on execute, I can see that all the columns that I've listed has appeared. No, all the columns from the tables have appeared, but they want me to retrieve the policy name. They want me to retrieve the policy number. There's no policy number. Okay, insurance policy number. So they want me to retrieve the insurance. See why it is important to always go into the table to understand what the table have for us. Insurance policy number, they want us to also call the insurance expire date, and they want us to call the claim status from that table. One step at a time, I can run this code and I will see that this is what they call the three field that they are looking for. But now they want me to rename the status to only call uh, the claim status to only be called status. So I'm going to reformat the code to make it look a little bit more friendly. All I can do at this point, I can come down and say AS. So it's just like my name is Jonathan. So it's just like you call me Jonathan as John, something like that. So that is what we're doing here. So we'll call this guy, we say they want us to call it status. And if I do that, I can see it's blue. So I'm going to take the blue off to avoid any confusion. I'm going to take the blue off by putting a square bracket surrounding it. And I can run this code. And we can see that the claim status have changed to status, no longer claim status. And remember, I can also write this code by not putting the AS and it will still run. So if I copy this code and place it here, but now this time I take this guy off, take the as off and run this code like this. I can see that it still works and it is still giving me status. So that is how we call the alias, changing the appearance of our column name. We can use that same information or that knowledge and answer another question. They want us to retrieve the appointment date, appointment type, the reason of the visit, and note from the appointment table, but want us to rename couple columns. They want us to rename the appointment type to only display type and the appointment time to only display time. So let's do first thing first. Get into our table. Select start from DBO, DBO.appointment table. I will run this code by selecting it and executing it. When I do, I can now see that I have those columns that they are specifying. And the first one that they want me to get is the appointment date. They want now, because of the formatting, I'll format it at once. Format appointment date. Next, it's appointment type. The next one is the reason of visit. And the next one is the notes. And one step at a time, I'm going to run this code and see what is going on underneath the layer. And I can see that these are the columns that they want me to write to return, but they need me to rename two columns. The first one that they want me to rename is to rename the appointment type to just say type. So I say this could be type. I'm going to put a square bracket just to take off that blue purple thing off. And the next one is the so they also want me to put appointment. No, they want me to appointment. They want me to bring appointment time. I don't know if there's anything like appointment. Yeah, there's an appointment time. Okay. Sorry about that. I missed the other column. So I can come down here. They want me to rename the appointment time to only say time. And remember, I can always take the AS off, but for readability, it is good for us to have it on there. So I can run this code and I can see that these columns have been changed to a more user-friendly thing. So let's look at the last video, the last code or requirement for this particular video. They want us to get the first name, last name, date of birth, medical license number, and the employment history from the medical staff. But they want us to rename the employment history to just say history. They want us to rename the first name to just say capital F space name. And they want us to rename the date of birth to birth date. And the medical license number to say license number. So there's a lot of things we're gonna do, which is a good thing to save the best for the last. So we're gonna go in and say select staff from. They're calling for the medical staff table, and we can run this code and see what we have. We're going to this table. We have a lot of useful information, but they want us to only pull specific columns. The first one they want us to get is the first name. The second one they want us to get is the last name. The third one that they want us to get is the date of birth. It's date of birth, not date of birth. Date of birth. The next one they want us to bring is the medical history. Is the medical history. Sorry, the medical license number. And the next one they want us to get is the employment history. So we have employment history. We say employment history. So those are the columns that they want us to bring. We're going to run it. And we can see those columns. But they want specific requirement. Look at this. This name, they want us to now have the dash. Take the dash off as an alias. I come here, I say as, I'm going to put a square bracket, open and close, and inside of the square bracket, I will call the name. The reason being that I am going to be given the alias two different words. To do it without failure, I have to put something that will contain those two words as one. That's why I put the square bracket. So, for example, if I don't put these two square bracket and I say first space name, SQL now is only seeing this guy as the alias, but not including this. But the requirement is that we should get the first name as two words. So that means for me to contain these two words into one, I need to put a square bracket at the beginning and the square bracket at the end. And one step at a time, I will run it to see if things are working normal. I look at it, this one works. Now they want me, oh, let's do the from the top. They don't need us to change the last name, but they want us to do the date of birth to be birth date. So I can come down here, I can say as, but this time, instead of a square bracket, I want to use a single quote and see how it behaves. So I will say birth date, put a single quote like this. And if I run it, I can see that the birth date changed to two words, birth date. How about the medical license number? They want us to change the medical license number to just say license number. But this time I'm not going to use a square bracket. I'm not going to use the single quote. I'm going to use a double quote. I can use the double quote and say license number. And they put a dot and they close the double quote. And if I run it, I can see that it did change to license number. The last one is to rename the employment history. Do we have employment? The employment history to just say history. So this one is a single word. I do not need to put anything. So I can just say history. And if I run it, I can see that we are good and it gives us that particular information. So that is how the SQL extracting data from a single table will behave. And this is just the basics. With this basic, if we're able to understand this basic, we will transition into doing more intermediate to advanced kind of querying. So I advise you to stick around. This note that we learned today, I'm going to push it also. You will see the link of where you can get the same note so you can practice if you're following along with the series. And our next video will be coming up where we'll be talking about how we do more intermediate to advanced kind of querying. So I want to encourage you to please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and do not forget to hit the notification button. And if you have any question, any comment, any feedback, I, I want to ask you to help me be better. I'm learning from you guys. So what you see that I don't see, help me tell me about my blind side so that I can build this channel and help you learn new other things. And if you have any question about any specific topic, if we have not gotten there, I'll take note of it and I'll present it once we get to that particular lecture. Thank you, and I'll see you around again. Bye bye.